I'm going to show you different shading techniques in this video, but it's difficult to make a good job of shading if your pencil isn't sharpened correctly. I use a heavy-duty craft knife and a sandpaper block. I remove the wood using a shallow angle from the tip first and sharpen the tip, then working my way up to reveal a longer length of lead. It's important to use this shallow angle, otherwise you'll break the lead. Once I've removed enough wood, I then take the sanding block to sharpen it further. So you can see here that I've got about 2 to 2.5 centimetres of lead exposed, and then the sanding block will have a fine grade paper and a heavier duty paper, but you can also use a nail file emery board for the same job, and I use the finer one generally to get a very good tip. As I run it down the board, I rotate the pencil so that you get an even round barrel on the lead. So you can see that's a very sharp tip now, and I just clean away any dirty areas off the wood at the top and then clean the tip of the pencil. So looking at the different techniques, I have continuous tone, stipple and hatching and cross hatching. And here I've done versions at the bottom as well that are loose edged ones. I'm working within a circle shape. You can do it in a square or whichever shape you want. And hatching first is drawing lines at an angle quite quickly in one direction and keeping the distance quite close together and equal. If you have big gaps between those lines or areas where they overlap, it makes lighter and darker areas, and that's something that you want to try and avoid. You can use this technique in various directions. So once we go over it in the opposite direction, this is called cross hatching because it's crossing over the original line. And you can work in multiple directions around a shape with this technique, and we'll see that later on a subject. So the second method is called stipple, and it's using the very tip of the pencil to make very small round dots, and the closer together they are, the more shaded an area is, and the further apart, the lighter. You can also alter the pressure slightly to make them darker or lighter as well. Now the important thing here is to make these dots round and small and not to elongate them into lines or shapes, and their proximity to one another should be equal so that there are no lighter or darker areas from overlapping dots or gaps. So if you find you have an area where there's a gap, you fill that area by putting dots in between it, and this will give you an even shading. Now this technique is used a lot in more traditional botanical illustration using ink, and I'll be showing you examples of using an ink pen as well to use this technique for those who are interested in it. It is quite a difficult technique to master, so it'll take you a little bit of time to get used to doing it, and you may find that you have gaps and darker areas initially, but the more you practice it, the easier it gets. And I've sped it up a little bit here, but take your time with this technique. If you don't take your time, you will tend to drag the dots and make shapes that are not round. And the other thing is try twisting the pencil sometimes. If you're finding it really difficult, twist the tip of the pencil as you lift it from the paper. But as I say, this is speeded up, and just to show you how you can go back in here and add more dots, so increasing the density of them to make it darker. So the third and final technique here is continuous tone, and this is the one that I probably use most in my botanical drawings. It's a way of shading where you don't rely on any outline at all. So whatever you draw first, you create a very fine pale outline, and then you add tone, and the tone does all work. You don't rely on the outline at all, it blends into the tonal work. So using a slightly less steep angle of the pencil than with the stipple, but still quite elevated, I use these small elliptical motions with the pencil, and they have to be very tight together in order to fill the grain of the paper and create a smooth finish. Now don't be afraid of going back over it again, you'll go back and forth over it. The aim is to get a smooth finish. So don't think you start at the top and finish at the bottom. If you need to go back over it and fill in, then do so. You can alter the pressure of how you apply it. When you start, you'll find sometimes you make a darker area, and this is the point when you first make contact with the paper, when your hand-eye coordination is getting used to the weight of the pencil when it meets the paper. So you can start off and find you can have a dark area. So you have to start off slightly lighter than you think you need, and you may need to go back and fill in there. But you can see how I'm working down and easing the pressure slightly to make it lighter at the bottom. I'm going back over and filling in areas where I feel there's not as smooth as it should be. I'll just go back over it again. If you find it's grainy, go over it again. This board I'm using here, this paper is Strathmore Bristol board. It's a very smooth, even finish. I actually prefer to do most of my drawings on HP paper, a hot press, which has a slight grain to it, but it's possible to get the same smooth finish on the hot press paper. It's just got a bit more of a key in the surface than this. So I'll show you a few different papers during the graphite part of the course and how they react. Some people prefer Bristol board, which is very smooth, and others prefer hot press watercolour paper. So we've covered cross-hatching, hatching, stipple and continuous tone here. And next I'm going to show you how to put them into practice on a subject, because this exercise, although it's good practice, it doesn't actually tell you very much about how you would apply this to an actual subject with light and shade. So that's the next part in this exercise.